Thank you, Chairman, and Director Haynes, Director Burns, and General Barrier. I think this is the first time the three of you have appeared at this particular hearing, and certainly we're glad and grateful to have all of you here. Director Haynes, let's talk a little bit. You and I have talked about the overhead architecture issues. The part of the development of how you use AI is how much information you have to continually train on. We may talk about that later this afternoon, but for right now, the Chinese have announced public plans for 138 satellite commercial constellations that can image around the globe every 10 minutes. How big a risk is that for us, and what can we do to enhance our own diversity by expanding the number and the diversity of the satellites we have up there providing constant information, commercial and non-commercial?
Thank you, Senator. I think it may be useful to have a further discussion about this in closed session, but I think there's just no question as a general matter that China is focused on achieving leadership in space, in effect, as compared to the United States, and has been working hard on a variety of different efforts in this area to try to contest what has been presumed our leadership in these areas. And I think for the details, let's discuss in closed session.
Well, I think we'd want to do that and look at both the diversity of what we have up there and how it competes with what they'll have. On a really different question, Director Burns, you have extensive personal knowledge and experience with Putin. How do you assess what he's doing right now near and in the eastern Ukraine and the impact that may have? Is this an actual movement? Do we think it's a bluff to try to get concessions, a little of both? What do you think about the Putin actions right now as it relates to Ukraine?
Well, Senator, thanks for the question. I think, as I said in my confirmation hearing, most of my white hair came from serving in Russia and dealing with Putin's Russia over the years. So one thing I've learned is not to underestimate, the ways in which President Putin and the Russian leadership, can throw its weight around. I think, and I'll turn to General Barrier about this in a moment, but, I think obviously the Russian military buildup in Crimea and alongside the border of the Donbass is a serious concern. I think it could be a combination of the things that you mentioned, signaling a way of trying to intimidate the Ukrainian leadership, signals to the United States, but also that buildup has reached the point where, it also could provide the basis for limited military incursions as well. And so it's something not only the United States, but also our allies has to take very seriously. And I know Director Haynes and I and others have been involved in, a number of briefings and conversations with our allies as well, so that we're sharing information and they share that same concern, I think, that we have as well. And that was part of the purpose of the President's call yesterday to President Putin, was to register very clearly the seriousness of our concern.
Good. We'll probably talk about that more later, too. General Barrier, what's your sense of what's happening there and the concerns we should have about it?
Senator, working with our partners in Joint Staff J2, European Command, NATO, and our key Five Eyes partners, the Russians have positioned themselves to give themselves options. So as we've watched that buildup of forces, they could actually be going into a series of exercises starting any time, or they could, if they chose to perhaps do a limited objective attack, they may take that option. We don't know what the intent is right now. I agree with Director Burns and his assessment of that, and we can go into more detail in the closed session, sir.
Let me see if I can get one more question in, General Barrier. We know that our adversaries, no matter what level of involvement they had in the pandemic, can see now the impact that has on a big, open, free society like ours, but they also can see the impact it has on the military. Look what happened on the USS Theodore Roosevelt and in other places. What are we thinking about as a potential way we'd respond to similar circumstances?
Certainly,
from the point of view.
Senator, the pandemic has given us insights on how we can do our jobs better should this happen again. In terms of readiness of our key adversaries that we watch, I think initially it did have an impact on the readiness of those forces, although they seem to have overcome that. As an example, is what we're seeing with the Russians in the Ukraine and the Crimea right now does not appear to be impacted by COVID. And so we continue to watch that very carefully across the spectrum of foreign military intelligence.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.